Onome was only 26 when Lagos broke her down to her knees. She had come from Warri with nothing but a nylon bag and her 2-year-old daughter, Ibube, hoping the city would open its doors. Lagos did not. Instead, it swallowed her in debts, hunger, and the endless noise of survival. Her husband had abandoned her before Ibube was even born, saying he wasn't ready to be tied down with responsibility. She had begged him, wept until her voice cracked, but he walked away, leaving her to fight alone. From that moment, Onome made herself a promise, she would never beg any man again. But promises don't feed children. The one room she rented in Makoko was barely standing. When it rained, the roof leaked until she and Ibube had to sleep curled up on a wooden bench, hugging each other to stay dry. Most nights, they went to bed with nothing but sachet water and pure hope. Onome tried different hustles. She fried akra for a week until her kerosene finished and she couldn't afford another bottle. She washed clothes for neighbors, but they always delayed her pay. She hawked sachet water at bus stops, but area boys snatched her tray one evening. It was at that point she decided to try her luck with second-hand clothes. She knew where the Bend Down Select Market at Yoba was, and with the little 3,000 naira she had saved, she bought a small bale of old tops and skirts. But Lagos markets were like war zones. Rent for a tiny store was almost 7,000 naira a month, and she couldn't afford that. So she looked for where people were not too many but still passed by daily. That was how she ended up by the lagoon side, close to a stretch of shacks where fishermen lived. It was a lonely place. Most traders avoided it, saying it was bad luck to set up business near the water. But Onome was desperate. Rent was free there, just spread your mat and display your clothes. Every morning, she would bathe Ibube with water fetched in a rusted tin, feed her with whatever little she could afford, then carry her child on her back as she headed to her stall. She arranged her faded skirts and tops neatly on a spread-out sack and waited. But days passed. Weeks even. And no one bought anything. Fishermen passed her with their nets. Women carrying buckets avoided even looking at her side. Even children playing with tires stopped short when they reached her corner. At first, she thought maybe her clothes weren't fine enough. But when she saw people happily buying from other hawkers inside the main road, she realized the truth: it wasn't the clothes. It was the location. The lagoon stretched behind her like a sleeping giant, its surface too calm for a city as noisy as Lagos. Some nights, she swore she heard whispers coming from the water, like women humming softly. Ibube sometimes pointed at the lagoon and giggled as though someone was waving at her. "Stop that," Onome would scold. "Nobody day there." Still, something about the lagoon made her skin crawl. One late evening, after yet another hopeless day of no sales, Onome packed her clothes into her nylon bag and strapped sleeping Ibube to her back. The moon was bright, casting silver ripples over the water. She stood staring at the lagoon for a moment, her throat tight with frustration. "God," she whispered. "Why me? Wetin I do? Not only this pikin I get. At least, make I sell small. Just small. I know they ask for mansion. Just food. Just rent." Her eyes burned with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. Crying never helped. Survival did. She was about to turn when she heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching behind her. Slow. Deliberate. She froze. No one usually came that way at night. When she turned, she saw a woman. The stranger was tall, wrapped in a flowing wrapper that looked too clean for that muddy riverside. Her hair was long and dripping wet, yet her clothes were dry. She walked barefoot, but her steps made no sound on the damp sand. Onome's chest tightened. Something about the woman didn't feel normal. "Good evening, my sister," the woman said softly, her voice like wind moving over water. "Evening, ma," Onome replied, shifting nervously. The woman's eyes moved to the bag of clothes in Onome's hand. Then she smiled faintly. Business slow? Onome swallowed. No, be small. Nobody want buy anything here. The woman tilted her head. I can help you. Onome frowned. Help me? Yes. Sell my clothes. And you will never lack customers again. Before Onome could respond, the woman dropped a black nylon bag on the ground. Then she turned and walked calmly toward the lagoon. Wait. Onome called out, her voice trembling. But the woman didn't wait. She stepped into the water, and instead of sinking, the lagoon seemed to open its arms for her. She vanished beneath the surface as though the water swallowed her whole. Onome's knees weakened. She looked at the black nylon bag. For a long time, she hesitated, her mind screaming for her to leave it alone. But hunger is louder than fear. She picked it up. Inside were clothes. Not faded second-hand clothes, but beautiful, expensive-looking dresses, skirts, and blouses, the kind she had never even touched in her life. Onome clutched the bag to her chest, her heart thundering. She didn't know if she had just been blessed or cursed. But for the first time since she came to Lagos, she felt that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. The next morning, Onome spread out the new clothes in front of her stall. They glittered in the sun, silk gowns, sequin tops, crisp trousers that looked like they belonged in boutiques on the island. She couldn't even price them properly. In her head, she rehearsed. 500 naira, she whispered. Then shook her head. No, 1,000. But something in her spirit told her these clothes weren't for bend-down select pricing. By 7 a.m., she was ready. Ibu played with a stick by her side. The lagoon was unusually calm, the water as smooth as glass. At first, it was the same, silence. People passed without looking. She was about to sigh in frustration when it happened. A woman in a neat office skirt stopped suddenly. She turned, her eyes falling on the clothes. How much for this gown? She asked, picking a flowing purple dress. Onome's lips trembled. 3,000. The woman didn't even bargain. She brought out money and paid. Onome's heart nearly jumped out of her chest. 3,000 in one sale. She wrapped the dress and handed it over, still dazed. Minutes later, two young girls passing by also stopped. They picked blouses, paid, and left. Then a man in a jeep parked right in front of her stall. He came down, looked through her spread, and bought 3 trousers without blinking. By 9 a.m., she had made more money than she ever dreamed of. Her stall was suddenly alive, women flocking like moths to fire. They didn't bargain. They didn't complain. They just bought, smiling strangely, as though they had been waiting for her all along. Onome's head spun. She didn't understand it, but her pockets grew heavy with naira notes. By evening, she counted her earnings, over 75,000 naira. In just one day. Her eyes filled with tears. God, no miracle be this. Obi I daydream. But miracles in Lagos don't last. That night, she carried Ibube home, fed her with rice and fish for the first time in weeks, and they laughed together until they both fell asleep. But her joy was cut short. The next morning, as she walked to her store, she noticed something strange. A crowd had gathered by the lagoon, whispering in fear. When she drew closer, she saw it. A woman's shoe, soaked and muddy, floating gently on the water. Onome's heart skipped. It was the same purple dress she had sold yesterday. Torn. Stained. Floating on the surface of the lagoon. And the woman who bought it? Nowhere to be found. Onome couldn't sleep that night. The image of the torn purple dress floating on the lagoon haunted her. She tossed on the thin mat, her arm around little Ibyub, but each time she closed her eyes, she saw the woman who had bought it the day before, smiling, counting money, now swallowed by water. At first, she tried to convince herself. Maybe the woman just dropped the dress in the lagoon. Maybe she washed it and the breeze carried it away. But Lagos people weren't fools. The whispers at the waterside were growing louder. They say the lagoon takes what belongs to it, one fisherman murmured as he mended his net. Another spat on the sand. That girl way they sell for they go soon here Nobody they play with water spirits and go free. Onome's chest tightened. Did they mean her? But then she looked at the bundle of money tucked under her pillow. 75,000 naira. Enough to pay rent for 2 months, buy food for Ibyub, maybe even send her to a small nursery school. Fear trembled in her, but hunger shouted louder. The next morning, she returned to her stall. She almost expected no one to come near, but instead, the opposite happened. Even more people showed up. Women she had never seen in the area, young men looking for jeans, elderly women asking for wrappers, all came as though drawn by an unseen hand. By the end of the day, her nylon bag was almost empty. And her earnings? Over 200,000 naira. Onome's heart thudded in joy and dread. She couldn't deny the money was real. She couldn't deny that Lagos had finally opened its doors for her. But each time she looked at the lagoon, she thought she saw faces staring back at her from beneath the water. Pale faces. Familiar faces. Faces of her customers. Still, she told herself, I cannot stop now. If the lagoon wants something, it should leave me and my daughter alone. I only want to survive. But Lagos never lets blessings stay clean. That night, as she carried Ibyub home on her back, she passed a group of women whispering. Not that single mother, one hissed, pointing at her. The one by the lagoon. You never hear? Anybody way by her clothes they disappear. Shoo. Keep quiet, the other scolded. You want bring wa Allah? Spirit they follow that one. Onome quickened her steps. Her palms grew clammy. At home, she locked the door with shaky hands, spread out her money, and whispered to herself. This one no fit be curse. No blessing. No blessing. But deep inside, she wasn't sure anymore. 1 week passed. Onome had grown bolder. She now dressed better, bought small jewelry, and walked with her head higher in Makoko. Neighbors noticed. Some congratulated her, some grew jealous. But nobody asked too many questions, they only whispered when her back was turned. Every day, she sold clothes until her bag was empty, and every night, the lagoon seemed to return them. Whenever she opened the bag the next morning, new fresh clothes were inside, richer than the last. She didn't question how. She didn't want to. But Ibyub noticed something her mother didn't. Mommy, see Auntie Dem, the little girl said one afternoon, pointing at the lagoon. Onome turned sharply. Which auntie? The ones way they wave. See Dem for water. There was nothing there. Only ripples moving lazily across the surface. Onome knelt to her daughter's level. Shoo. No they talk like that. You hear? But Ibyub kept pointing. Dem they smile, Mommy. Dem say make I come play. Onome's blood ran cold. She yanked her daughter's hand down. Stop If you talk that thing again, I go flog you. Ibyub's eyes watered. She pouted, but she obeyed. Still, that night, Onome couldn't sleep. She watched her daughter's tiny chest rise and fall, wondering, can she really see something I can't? The next day, things grew worse. A well-dressed man parked by her store, bought a shirt, and drove off. The crowd that had gathered whispered in awe. Onome felt powerful, almost untouchable. But as she turned to arrange the rest of her clothes, she caught sight of Ibube again, this time standing very still, her eyes locked on the lagoon. "Them they call me, Mummy," she whispered. Onome's heart nearly stopped. "Who?" Before Ibube could answer, a fisherman passing by dropped his basket in fear and muttered, "That child they see em. Spirits go soon take em." Onome spun on him angrily. "Shut your mouth." But when she looked back at the lagoon, for a split second, just one, she swore she saw them too. Pale arms reaching out of the water. Faces smiling where there should be none. She scooped up her daughter, trembling. Her customers were still buying, but her hands shook so badly she could barely wrap their clothes. That evening, as she walked home with money stuffed into her blouse, she whispered to herself again and again, "I know fit stop. I know fit stop. God no go allow anything happen to me." But deep inside, she knew she had already crossed a line. The money kept growing. By the end of the second week, Onome had over ₦1,000,000 hidden in a tin under her bed. Rent was no longer a problem. Feeding was no longer a problem. Even neighbors now greeted her with respect, calling her to madam. But her peace of mind? That was gone. Every night, when the wind blew across Makoko, she heard faint knocking sounds. At first, she thought it was rats. But the knocking grew louder, sharper. Always around midnight. Then came the dreams. In them, she saw herself standing at the lagoon, wearing one of the gowns she had sold. Behind her, shadows of women in torn dresses circled, whispering, "Give us back, give us back." She would wake up sweating, clutching Ibube tight. One night, just past midnight, she heard the knock again. This time, it wasn't faint. It was at her door. Knock. 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 She froze. Her mouth went dry. Nobody in Makoko visited at that hour. Slowly, she crept toward the door, holding a kitchen knife in her hand. Knock. 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 She whispered, "Who dey there?" Silence. Then, in a voice that chilled her marrow, came the reply. "Your customers." Onome staggered back, her knife clattering to the floor. She looked at Ibube, fast asleep on the mat. When she turned back to the door, water was seeping underneath it. Cold. Clear. Rising fast. Her breath hitched. She backed away, clutching her daughter, as the knocking turned into pounding. Boom. 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 "Open the door, seller," the voices chorused. "We have come for what is ours." Onome screamed, but no sound came out. She pressed her daughter to her chest as the water climbed higher, reaching her knees. And then, silence. The knocking stopped. The water vanished. When she dared open the door, there was nothing. Only the quiet night of Makoko. But on the ground, right at her doorstep, lay a single torn dress. The same dress she had sold that afternoon.